Now that Phase 5's been out, I think it's a good time to make everyone's favorite type of video, a tier list. For this video, we're going to be predicting where we think all of the specs are going to land at the end of Phase 5, so let's get right into it. Let's start off with the healers. Without a doubt, it really just comes down to the utility all of these bring. I think all of the healers are very competitive when it comes to healing per second. They're very neck and neck depending on each fight, and they all have their strengths and weaknesses. But in terms of ranking them, I have to put the Disc Priest above everything else. The Holy Pally would be right behind that, as well as the Shaman. I would argue that Holy Pally can edge up into this S tier as well, but I think in terms of utility, the Disc Priest is just a little bit ahead of them. Also joining them in the A tier is going to be the Resto Druid. I think that this is pretty much the meta comp in most speedruns, and I don't see that changing in the future. You're always going to bring a Disc Priest, you're almost always bringing a Resto Druid, and then depending on what faction you're on, you're going to bring a Shaman or a Paladin. Lastly, the Mage Healer and the Holy Priest are just a step below these healers. I don't think that they're awful by any means. I just think they're missing a little bit of utility in terms of what these other specs bring. Just a brief mention of the Shadow Priest. Vampiric Embrace is pretty strong at the moment, and just if you spread them up in the correct groups, like some of the progression runs, it was like having an extra healer in the raid, so definitely worth a mention on the tier list. Moving on to the tanks, I feel like it's a very similar story to the healers. They're all very viable, but it's just these little marginal differences that make them better than each other. Without a doubt, the Feral Druid and the Prot Warrior, I think, are the top two main tanks at the moment. In terms of off tanks, I think the Demo Lock is your go-to. Same for the Rogue, the Enhance, and then the Prot Pally. I think these can easily go into S tier depending on the fight. Like Chromag, for example, your Warlock is probably the go-to tank on that fight, and then your Feral becomes the go-to off tank. Very interchangeable. Just depends on what kind of comp you're going to build, but I think the meta 2 picks are going to be the Feral and the Prot Warrior for the tier. Finally, let's wrap this video up with the DPS. Let's start off with the S tier classes. I think the Feral Druid and the Fury Warrior are going to be at the top of the meters by the end of this tier. I think the Survival Hunter could also be in that tier as well. Right behind that, I would have to say the Enhance, the Ret Paladin, and then the Fire Mage. And not far behind that would maybe be the Assassination Rogue, and then the Combat maybe goes below it only because of fights like Chromag, where Envenom could be pretty strong. Let's go ahead and put these down here because they're just not getting any love since last phase, so I don't think that they're going to suddenly spike up and do a ton of damage. And then same thing for the Demo Lock. Everyone was saying Demo Lock was the highest simming spec, and Affliction is doing well and beyond what the Demo Lock is doing. Even Destruction is ahead of it. Not sure if that's correct or the sim was just completely wrong. Balance is probably right here, just a little bit below like Marksman essentially. And then let's see, is there anything else? Shadow Priest. Shadow Priest is behind this. And then let's see. What else are we missing? Ellie. I have to put Ellie down here. Yeah, Frost Mage is probably here, maybe even above it. And then Melee Hunter. Melee Hunter I think is really strong and put him in the middle. And I think Sub Rogue would maybe be here. Now that we've kind of thrown most of these on the board, what I'm going to do now is kind of rearrange these and kind of assort them and say, okay, are all these S tier? Yeah, I think so. Are all of these A tier? Nah, I think this one goes back up there. So that's what we're going to do now. I think all of these are good. You could maybe even put Combat Rogue as well. I mean, it's the same thing as Mage. If Frost Mage is good, you're just going to play that instead. So they're pretty interchangeable. Affliction, I would have to say we're just going to leave Affliction here. Marksman, Balance, Shadow, and then Melee Hunter. I think we should put Melee Hunter above. I think Melee Hunter can go into A tier. I think the rest of these are pretty solid. Obviously, all of this could change in the next coming weeks. They could buff some classes, they could nerf some classes, they could change how the logs are read entirely. They could normalize the damage on Chromag's vulnerabilities. They could normalize the damage on Veil's burning adrenaline. And then, of course, the ad phase on Nefarian, they could take that away completely and make the ads not count, or have a fixed amount to where you can only get 100k added to your log. That is pretty much it. I will be making a DPS analytic video for each week of Phase 5, comparing the log data and just going over what specs are moving up in the rankings. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe for more videos just like this. Comment down below what you'd like to see next, and as always, I will see you in the next one.